Hello, this is Adam Watson, and welcome to part two of my videos about making Google Forms. Um, Google Forms is definitely something that I've really enjoyed over the last several months getting into and making. I certainly see its power, and I won't pretend that these videos are going to make you a complete expert about Google Forms, and that's something I won't even claim for myself, but hopefully to give you some tips and some ideas on how to start and create and make your own Google Forms. So we've gotten to the point where we've actually created the Google form, and we did that in the first video. Now we're here to look at some of the editing functions of what we can do inside the Google form. First off is the theme. So right here where it says change theme is the easiest way to reach that. And when we click that, we can see a bunch of different options here, and it'll give you an idea of what it looks like at the fair, beach evening. You get the idea. I should add that until very recently, there was a very huge lack of different options as far as what the Google Forms would look like. You basically had your choice of like A, B, or C, and that was about it. But giving Google credit, they are trying to expand the different looks. You might think the theme is a tomato-tomato kind of issue, but I will say this. If you end up doing a lot of Google Forms that you use to reach out for your students or for your faculty or whatnot, I think changing the theme to different appearances helps. If you always end up using the same form, I think there's a sameness and maybe even cause confusion because somebody will just take a quick peek and think, oh, this is a survey or a form I've already filled out. Whereas if you change the looks, it'll help with that. For the sake of argument, we're going to choose farm life. And that gives you kind of a quick idea of what that looks like there. And with that, I think I'm happy. So I'm going to go back to editing the questions. All right. When you add different materials, there are different things that you can add to it. By default, you have your first question up here, and it's a multiple choice question. We can change that, and we will in just a second. But for a moment, I'm just going to skip on down here to where it says Add Item. And if you click on the drop-down arrow, you can see lots of different options. And the couples I want to point out that you may not be aware of is things like a section header. So you can have just text information, maybe to set up the next set of questions you're about to ask or whatnot. This seems like a small thing, but I actually struggled with that, thinking that everything had to be in the form of a question or whatnot, until I realized no, that there is that option there. That's different than the text or paragraph text, which are answer choices we'll get to in a second. Image is being able to insert a particular photo. And video is just that, inserting a video, like say a YouTube video link. And where both of those might come in handy, and just to give out a couple of examples really quickly, let's just take the video for example. Perhaps you're emailing out or surveying your staff about the need for differentiation PD. But maybe the idea of what differentiation actually is something you think is important to define. Now you could write that up. But as they say, a picture being worth 1,000 words, if you had an infographic that you want to add as an image, or perhaps a YouTube video of someone like Rick Wormelli talking about differentiation, that might be a good setup for the set of questions you're going to ask afterwards. If you're using these directs with students, same kind of idea. Perhaps the video is a review of a material you've already talked about before they're about to launch into an assessment or a quiz of some sort. So you can see the power of being able to add those kind of media into your Google form. Let's go on to the questions themselves. So as I said, right here by default, we have a multiple choice question. So we can write our question here. We can have some help text, some information to kind of put that question in context if we think it's necessary. And as I enter in our different options here, what is your favorite color? Okay, I can easily skip down and create more options. And then if I want to, by choosing Add Other, then they have an option of putting their own choice there. One thing that's a little bit beyond the scope of this particular video is going to be the idea that you can go to page based on answer, and that gives you a whole interesting another way of doing Google Forms, because depending on which strategy you're interested in as a teacher, for example, might lead you to another subset of questions about a PD or a specific option that you want to take perhaps. But from another point of view, this could give kind of a choose your own adventure feel to your Google form. So think of that like as your Google form is really a different narrative maybe you have with students They are following a particular literary character, and as they make the choices, it's going to lead to a branching path of A instead of B, and so on. It's a little bit more work, I think, to kind of keep track of that as far as how the pages branch out and come together. But Google Form does it pretty well, and if you're willing to spend a little time that way, that is an option with multiple choice. So for this one, I'm going to say done when I'm ready. But before I do, I just want to point out one more thing, which is the required questions. Of course, you don't have to make all of them required questions, but you want to keep it so that there's certain information that they cannot submit the form without asking or answering that particular question. Obviously, some key things like your name, perhaps their email address, something that you don't want them to accidentally forget or forego. Of course, there's no limit. You can make every single question required, and therefore they can't forget even a single one without being stopped by the Google form before they submit. So for the sake of argument, I'll make this a required question, hit done, and this little red asterisk that's right here gives an indication that that's a required question. Quickly, we'll go through some of the other options here for adding an item. By default, if you hit add item, it's going to come up with the same default, same type of question that you just had. But even from here, you can change your mind. So for text, you can talk about a small text box that will pop up. And this gives you an idea, a reminder that this is just a small amount of information if they don't have a lot to type, maybe just your name, for example. And, okay, we can choose a paragraph text, and you can see as a reminder a more giant box. Tell me about your favorite restaurant. Okay, and done. And again, you can see the difference. As far as the typing, you type past the box, and you can keep typing, and typing. But it's the idea of when you know that the answer is going to be longer, you want to give them more space. Okay, up next, let's do a drop down. Okay, so if we have a choose from a list, that's what they call it. And so what happens with this is favorite type of restaurant. Okay, again, you see one of those go to a page based on your answers is another option here. The difference here is let's just do one more. Okay. The difference here is that when the survey person takes the question, they're going to see, when they click here, a drop down of all those different choices. Now, I'll mention that this is an example where, to make it simpler, to eliminate variables and spelling and so on, a drop-down choose from your list is often one I use for things like school. Which school are you in the district? I go ahead and create that list so it's very uniform, and it's not a matter of whether they try to do the abbreviation for the school versus the whole spelling, whether it matters to you whether they have the word elementary at the end versus just the name, all those kind of things. You can make those variables minimized by having it as a drop-down, so they just simply have to choose one of those options. A couple more. We have checkboxes here. And again, the idea of this is that check all that apply. Okay, I like to eat, okay, fried food, vegan choices, paleo diet. Again, you get the idea here. And the idea here is that they could check one or more of those boxes when they actually answer that particular question. And let's see, as far as the scale, the option here, okay, is a Likert scale of 1 to 5. And you define what that means. 1 could be the least, and 5 is the most. And you could answer a question like, rate each city in terms of its eatability. I don't know if that's a word, but that'll work. And so, again, as far as the scale, they will choose that. Last couple of things that we have here is that just keep in mind that at the bottom, for the submit, you can change this default of your response has been recorded to something else if you like. By default, it says show link to submit another response, meaning that right then, and maybe you want them to do that, maybe you don't, they could click on it and go through the form all over again. You can allow respondents to edit the responses after submitting as far as an option. Again, if you think that that's important, or maybe it's a lot of detailed information, you want them to have a chance to change or fix that. But again, you can change the message here if you like. Now, when you're actually ready to see the form, you can click here on this button for View Live Form. You'll see a new tab will pop up here. And with the theme that we picked of the farm, we have all these different questions. You could answer them right here, check marking boxes. And again, in the end, when they're ready, just hit the Submit form and submit that in. It has an Edit This Form for me because I'm logged in and the browser knows that I'm the original creator of this form. So from this button, I could, if I wasn't already up with the tab over here, I could go back to editing that particular function. And I'm going to leave this page. Okay. And the last thing I want to show you is the Send form. From here, if you click on this button, you have a link that you can share. There's also ways that if you have a certain web page, you can embed this as code, so the form's sitting inside of it. It is possible also to do a shortened URL if you like. But the key here is that if you highlight that and copy it, you can paste it inside of an email, in a tweet, or wherever you need as far as sending out that information. Be advised, just like you can kind of see here, that the form's name is awfully long. So it's a little bit unwieldy. It is what it is as far as that, as far as its original form. Although the shortened URL, if you check mark that box, that will give you a little bit of a easier to digest version of it that you can share. You can send out via email to Google accounts or whatever right from this form, but to me I think it's just easier to just copy and paste this inside of your own email account, or fire up your Twitter, for example, and just throw that into the tweet, doing it that way. But in theory, there's a couple of options there. All right, and last but not least, from here is where you could also add collaborators if perhaps you have several teachers or whatnot that are all working on the same set of questions. Maybe this creating a form collaboratively, and then this is a way where you can allow through their Google accounts ways that they can come into the form and do editing and stuff as well. All right, so we're going to click Done here, and that's it. Of course, I can return to this form anytime I want to do more editing. The only warning that I have to give about that is that, and this goes back to something I said, I believe in the first video, the Google spreadsheet, that Google Sheets that's connected to this form that takes in all of those answers. And let me show that to you briefly here. Okay. If I change these questions or some of the options, especially after I started asking for people to submit answers, then it can mess with your data, your summary of responses to be able to look at it, and so on. Make sure that you feel comfortable that that's the final version of the form before you submit that out. And again, as they are submitted in, you could share this spreadsheet with other people if you want them to also see the answers that are on the spreadsheet. All right, that is enough for Google Forms. We're getting close to 15 minutes here, so it's a good time to stop. Hopefully you will start exploring and start learning in your own how to make Google Forms a powerful part of your organization in teaching life. Thanks so much for listening.